name's Eddie, and I am an alcoholic. Hey. And I am sober today by the grace of God and the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah, and it's really good to be here. I don't have a lot of time. I've always been able to talk as much as I need to, which is interesting because when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, 5 minutes was an eternity, right? And now 5 minutes is, I'm still introducing myself, so it's interesting. It's just interesting, but general service is a great way to learn how to publicly speak in places. So, anyways, I drank just like probably most of us sitting in this room, for a while, and then I became what they talk about up at the Solution Group up in North Seattle as a mad dog. I drank excessively, anything I could possibly get my hands on. I was in and out of jail. I was, my family didn't want anything to do with me. Employers were firing me, and life was a party for me, and I just kept going on, and I could talk for hours about that, but what I realized today is, today I've been sober longer than I was alive drinking and longer than I drank, and so it's, I've got much more of my story being sober today, which is pretty a cool thing. I didn't get sober because I woke up one day and thought, Alcoholics Anonymous sounds like a great place to go. Maybe I'll go join them, right? I was pulling myself out of my car. I just rolled down into a ditch, trying to get back up to the road, and there was an officer sitting up there asking me to do a sobriety test, and I kept trying to explain, how am I supposed to do a sobriety test? You see my car down there? I was rationalizing that I couldn't walk straight because I just rolled my car into this embankment. And he was just very patient with me, and I passed or failed that test as the case may be. I was arrested, and a couple months later I was sitting in front of a judge. And I had sat in front of a lot of judges during my drinking. I didn't do a lot of hard time, but I was doing life on the installment plan, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and it just kept rotating, And I sat in front of that judge that day, and he said, I'll tell you what, you can go to jail for a year, or you can go to Alcoholics Anonymous for 2. And I thought, I know what jail is. I don't want to go back, right? No thanks. I'll go try this Alcoholics Anonymous thing. I didn't think it had anything to offer me, but I knew that jail didn't have anything to offer me. And so I went to did the Alcoholics Anonymous thing. And I remember going in for this assessment. And this guy's asking me all these questions. It's like the 44 question pamphlet. How much do you drink? Do you ever drink after work? All these questions. I lied. I lied on every single one of those answers. Do you drink more than 1 beer? No. And I just lied on it. And when he got done, he pronounced me a late stage chronic alcoholic. It's about 2 years sober. I thought, what would that guy have said if I told him the truth, right? That he saw me coming. He could probably smell the alcohol on me. We may be thinking to ourselves when we're in that state that nobody knows, but the world knows who we are. It's very obvious. Or it was if you were around me back in those days. I was living in another state at the time. I decided to move away from that state because I couldn't get sober or do anything. I figured it was all the people that I was around. They later told me I did a geographical. I didn't know what that was. That's what I did. I moved up here to Washington. And I early on did the supreme sacrifice. I went to 1 meeting a week. I got there late. I left early, and I didn't talk to anybody. I did that for a couple months because they needed a court slip to be signed and stuff. And I remember leaving a meeting on a Saturday night from Valley Hospitals where the meetings were at, and that meeting just seemed horrible. It seemed really, really bad that night. People were talking about dying, getting fired, animals dying. And I don't remember all that was being said, but it just seemed horrible. And on my way home, I had a conversation with my higher power. And I just thought, this Alcoholics Anonymous thing isn't working. But I knew drinking and all the other stuff that I did wasn't working also. And when I got home, I got on my knees and I asked that higher power for help. I didn't know what I was praying for or about or anything. I said, I need help. And I don't know what that looks like, because I did not want to go back to that meeting, because that just did not seem like, so I was looking for some divine intervention that was going to, make me well so I could go back out to the bars and drink like normal people, like you see on TV, right? Go in, have a couple drinks and go home. That wasn't my story. But I didn't end up going back to that meeting. I ended up looking for a meeting on a Tuesday night in downtown Renton. And I walked into this meeting. There was 4 people sitting in that room, and the room was probably twice the size as this one. Had chairs all set up, and I thought, oh, I'm in the wrong meeting because there's only 4 people here. And those people got up to the podium. They shared what it used to be like, what happened, and what it was like now, and gave me some hope. Gave me some hope that this thing wasn't going to be like this forever. And they didn't call on me, which was an amazing thing, right? I thought that's what I was scared about. I was really quick when I was new, and I could unclasp hands and be out driving away smoking a cigarette before you realized anybody had left the room, right? And so I unclasped hands, got to the door, and 2 of them were standing there. These guys were good. I didn't really realize how good for a long time, for a sober while. But they more personally shared their stories with me. They asked me if I had a sponsor. They told me what a sponsor was. They asked me out for coffee, and it was great. I liked it, and I politely said no, I got to go, and I left. And that whole week, I thought about those people, and I thought I'm going to go back there, because that had something that I wanted. Those guys had something that I wanted, and I believe today I couldn't have got sober anywhere else. That was the right group of people for me. They were Nazis. Don't get me started. That's a bad word, but they believed in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they called you on stuff. They made you. They were very disciplined in their thinking. This guy tried to get sober there for a while. That's where I met Eric 30 years ago. But I went back the next week, and I showed up, and they again caught me at the front door, did the same thing, didn't ask to call on me. They knew I was new. They knew I was a suspect. They knew who I was. They again asked me if I had a sponsor, and I thought, oh, they don't know who I am. They're going to, They were asking me if I had a sponsor again. I said no. And one of them looked at me, and he said, how long do you want to stay sick? And I thought, you don't even know me. What are you telling me this stuff for, But, that they just kept hitting me with that. That's why I say they had that very, this way of talking. And I ended up asking one to be my sponsor eventually. Eventually I got sick and tired of the questions. So I thought, I'll show them, right? And this guy, when I asked, he sat down and he said, before I'm going to be your sponsor, I want to sit down with you and ask you some questions. Okay, whatever. He asked me a question, how happy do you want to be? Well, I want to be extremely happy. Doesn't everybody? Great, I want to be happy. He said, well, what lengths are you willing to go to for your sobriety? And that was the only question he really asked me during that whole conversation that I thought I knew the answer to, and I shouldn't have probably answered. Because I looked at him and I said, I'm willing to go to any lengths. And he said, great. He said, if you're willing to go to any lengths for your sobriety, I will go through anything that you need to go. I'll go to hell and back with you if you're willing to go to any lengths for your sobriety. But he said, if you're not willing to go to any lengths for your sobriety, you can go to hell by yourself, because I've already been there and I don't want to go back. And I thought, huh. And, but he called me on that. They'd be at the group on a Tuesday night and they'd be like, yeah, we're going to Montana this weekend. You'll be ready on your doorstep at 4:30 in the morning, Friday morning. I'm like, I got to work. He said, I thought you were willing to go to any lengths for your sobriety. I'm like, I am. He said, you got vacation time. You can take the day off. I'm like, okay, and they would talk about Alcoholics Anonymous all the way to Montana. And then all weekend it was an AA roundup, and they'd talk about Alcoholics Anonymous. And then all the way home, they'd talk about Alcoholics Anonymous, and I would get home and I'm like, okay, well, I have enough Alcoholics Anonymous to last me, a year or something at least, right? And he'd look at me and say, I'll see you tomorrow night for the meeting. And all I could do is put my head down and say, okay, because it was surrender is really what it was. I look back at that stuff though, and that just, those car rides, those conversations, doing these things, that's what it taught me, not just about Alcoholics Anonymous, but but it taught me about living life. You know, I came here to stop throwing up on my shoes, to stop going to jail, to stop getting asked to not show up at family reunions, to maybe get asked to come back to some places, whatever. I really wanted this thing, but in turn, I've learned to live my life. I've learned how to communicate with people and talk to them. I've learned how to have relationships. I've learned how to show up for things. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me over the years. I always say that group of guys and one women, it was guys and one woman, there was 4 of them. I just couldn't have got sober anywhere else. They said, we're having an event on a Saturday morning at the church where we met. Show up, you don't have to do anything. We're going to be cooking spaghetti. I'm like, okay, I can help get in the kitchen and cook spaghetti. That's not a big deal. And they had a CPC quarterly there, Cooperation with Professional Community. And that was the quarterly that was going on that weekend. And there was people from all over the state. We were all one state. This is early 90s. And they were from all over Washington State, parts of Idaho. And they would show up for this quarterly. They had East and West, but there was people from all over the state that would show up. And they would talk about this committee work. I had no idea what they were talking about, but I thought it was cool that people were showing up to do service work for Alcoholics Anonymous. And it fascinated me, and then it asked me to go to this monthly district thing that they were going to. And that was a little confusing, but my sponsor said, you're going to go. And I tried to make excuses, and he'd just look at me and say, I thought you were willing to go to any lengths for your sobriety. Okay, I'll be there. They asked me to go to this thing over in Chelan, Washington. It's at Lake Chelan at this little hotel that was over there. And I had no idea what was going on. It was an area quarterly. And, I'm 6 months sober or something. I didn't even know. I had no clue of what was going on. And I'm there, and these people were screaming at the man at the front of the room trying to chair the meeting. They would get up and they'd start arguing with him, and they would spit on the microphone because they were so upset. And then they'd walk away and they'd hit those folding chairs and they'd go bang on the ground, and everybody excited about it. And I thought, it was like one of my family get-togethers, where they're all anger and stuff going on. And I thought, why are these people here? And why, I had no idea what they were talking about, because it just didn't make any sense to me. And I thought, why are they doing this? And why are they so mad at this poor guy at the front of the room trying to chair the meeting? And so we were there all day, and then all of a sudden, they all got upset because the meeting had to close at 6 p.m. and that was it for the day. They couldn't come back, and they were not happy about that either. And so they were all they got done, they said the prayer, and they all left. But for some reason, they were coming back that night for some kind of round tables or something. And I couldn't figure out why we had to go back for that, but we came back, right? And those same people that were yelling and screaming and fighting and arguing with each other were now hugging and talking and communicating with each other. And that amazed me, because I did not understand that. Now, I knew being angry at you, I could look at you and say, you suck, and I could yell at you, and I could never talk to you again for the rest of your life, not have a problem with it. But I could never act that way and then go up and have a conversation with you later. That fascinated me at that point in my sobriety. I thought, they're that passionate about this thing we're calling Alcoholics Anonymous, but yet they can get over that anger and that frustration and that stuff and still have a conversation and care and hug and talk to these people. That was my first hook into general service. I saw that. I didn't know what they were talking about, but I wanted more of it. I wanted to learn more about that, because we had family get-togethers in my family. We'd get together once a year, and I'm not sure why we kept having them, but we'd get together once a year, and everybody would show up at a beach or somewhere, and it's somewhere in the middle of the thing, because everybody drank, everybody get mad at each other, and they'd start yelling and screaming, and cars would take out of the parking lot fast, and everybody would leave, and nobody would talk to each other again until we had the next family reunion. You know? And so I knew that stuff that they had going on in them, but I just didn't know how to get through it. And so that intrigued me about general service, because if you've ever been to an area assembly and you see the people get up there, they're very passionate about whatever it is they're talking about or believe in. But they can leave that passion there because we're doing what's the best for Alcoholics Anonymous. And my idea might not be the best for Alcoholics Anonymous. It might be your idea or somebody else's idea, and we all get to be a part of the discussion on that. We all get to tell our point of view, and then we all just go with what the best for everybody is. You know, what was it that there's a person that my wife and I know, and not one of us knows more than all of us. You know, that always meant something in my life to me today, that us together knows more than I know by myself. And that's what it is in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I got excited. I went to my first PRASA in 1991 down in Portland, Oregon. And I went down there, and there was a guy running around our area named George from Cedar Woolley at that time. And George he knew everybody, and he'd been sober, 15 years or something at the time. And he was the guru of the time. And so I went down to PRASA. I brought some new people with me, and there's people from all over the Pacific region there, from Southern California, from Idaho, from Utah, from Hawaii, and they're all converged on this hotel in Portland, Oregon. And I drove down there with some of my sponsees, and I started to meet some of these people. And these have been people that have been sober a long time, at least to me, and people that have been sober, 30 years at that time, 40 years, and they were actively doing stuff for Alcoholics Anonymous. They were giving of their time and energy. They weren't being paid to be down there. They weren't down there for any other reason than to do something for Alcoholics Anonymous. And those people intrigued me. Those people are the ones that I wanted to be like. They were giving back to this fellowship. They were staying sober. They weren't drinking. And they had the quality of life that I wanted. And so I started to get more involved in general service, and I became alternate GSR of my group. Then I got involved in the area, and I went on to do a lot of stuff. I served as area delegate in 2003 and 2004. It's a long time ago now. And when I served as delegate, I'm representing the groups of Western Washington and New York City at the General Service Conference, and I've got a little bit of a big head on me right now, because I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm doing all this, and what am I doing for AA, and all this other stuff's going on. And I'm sitting down at Battery Park at the end of New York City, and I'm thinking about what a sponsee back home's doing right now. He was out here, and he was going to the jail meetings locally back then, going out to North End Reform and doing a bunch of the AA meetings out here, and working down here at Seattle Intergroup, answering phones. And at that moment, I realized what I was doing for Alcoholics Anonymous was nothing different than what he was doing for Alcoholics Anonymous. His service was needed just as much as mine was at that moment in time. And we were, at that same level. And so it was one of those moments that I have that we're all really just equal in this thing. The best that we can all become is sober today. So, going through all this stuff, I got involved in general service and stuff, and I'm a couple years sober, and I'm thinking, I came in here to get that DWI off my record and not do that. And I figured at 2 years sober, I would stop getting that court slip signed, and I would be out of here. I figured by then I'd have enough information. What I was really trying to figure out is how to drink socially. That's what I was looking for, is to be able, because I really, really, and if I could do it today, it would be fun, but I realized today that I liked getting messed up, right? That's what I was always shooting for. But I always wanted to be able to go into the bar, have a couple drinks, and then go home, like everybody else seemed to do, or society said you should be able to do. And I never could do that. I'd go into the bar with all those intentions, and then it would just, I wouldn't show up for work the next day. I'd be gone. It would just, it went off the rails. And for the first couple of years of sobriety, I just kept trying to get back there. How can I figure this thing out? And I figured you guys would be able to show me. So I figured by the time my 2 years of the stench with the court systems got done, that I could probably just step back and slide out of this thing and maybe not continue on. And that never happened. I can remember that 2 year mark because it was this glooming thing. And, I just kept going to meetings, and I kept sponsoring guys, and I kept staying involved. My sponsor told me early on, he said, if you find yourself waking up on the floor every morning from rolling out of your bed, then maybe you ought to sleep in the middle of the bed. Because we're all going to toss and turn and roll over at night, right? That's just part of life. And if you sleep in the middle of your bed, then when you roll over, you won't roll off and get roll on the floor. He said the same thing works for Alcoholics Anonymous. Get in the middle of the fellowship. And so that means I got to attend meetings. I have to sponsor guys. I have to have a sponsor. I got to show up for places like when Austria emails me and says, hey, do you want to go do this? I'm like, no, but this is what I'm supposed to do, right? So, okay, I'll be there, right? And I'll trick somebody to come along with me. Poor Dave. I don't always feel good about that today. I feel sorry for Dave today, but that's how my sponsor got me involved. There was no choices in this stuff. It was, you do this, and it worked in my life. Because given a choice, I'm always going to say no, because I got so many other points. I'm going to be home washing my hair tonight. Because this takes a lot to make it look like this. So, so I just, I don't, and the guys I sponsor, I don't typically give them a lot of choices if possible too. I remember I was living in Renton, and I had a sponsee, and they'd always say no. Sponsees get smarter as time goes on. I'm not sure how, but so I used to mess them up a lot of times. So sometimes I'd be like, I'd ask them a question, and they'd be like, oh shit, what's he gonna ask? You free on Saturday? And you see deer in the headlights. Should we go? And they'd be like, yeah, we're free. I got tickets for the Seahawks. You want to come? And they'd be all excited, right? But other times, like, nope, we're going to swim for quarterly. Like, shit. Can we go back to the Seahawks game? Sobriety is fun too. It can be a lot of fun, and I've had a lot of fun in rooms like this. I'll share this real quick. So there used to be a guy, if you've been around here at any length of time, you may or may not have met him along the way. His name was Angus. He used to be office manager of this place back when he was here, office manager here for a while too. But back when it was down on Holgate, and I had a little white Jack Russell Terrier. His name was Taz. He was a maniac. For whatever reason, I brought Taz down with me. They were having some business meeting down here. It was an interview, some kind of business. I don't know what the meeting was, but it was a business meeting. And Taz is down here with me, and I'm getting ready to get up and give a presentation down here. And Angus goes, Eddie, come here. Like, yeah, what? He's like, your dog, Taz? I'm like, yeah, something wrong? He says, he just went up and hiked his leg on the podium. And I went, oh shit, I'm feeling really bad about this point, right? Because, my dog hiked his leg on the podium. He goes, no, don't worry about it. I wanted to do that for years. That was Angus. That was Angus. When I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I knew 4 people. I could count them on my hand, and I didn't want to know any more people than that. Those were the 4 people that were close to me in my life. And I was good for that with that. I never wanted, I had a lot of acquaintances. I knew a lot of people that I'd pass in the halls and knew they were acquaintances. I never wanted to add any more to that. Sobriety has given me the ability to know people, to get to know them, get to understand them, get to call them friends. Some of them are here tonight, and that's kind of a cool thing. Some people I've known for a long time here. And that's because of what you guys have taught me. Today I still go to that thing called PRASA. Gone to 30 of them or so now. And there's no other reason than I go down there every year to see people I know. There's people that I know that are just a part of my life. We've got an old timer in our region. In our delegate or in our structure here, named George, and he's got a lot of time. He's a past Pacific Region trustee. He's a past office manager. Everybody knows him. He's been to PRASA, more times than God. And and I met him at a PRASA, and he is a friend of mine, and not just an acquaintance. That's the part of it. He's an actual friend. And when things are going on, we call each other, we talk to each other. I was invited to a thing he had on Zoom the other day for one of his anniversaries. He personally reached out to me and said, "Hey, Eddie, I'm doing this. Come along and do it." When we see each other at PRASA, he sits out there and smokes a cigar. He's like 90 now. He's still out there smoking cigars every day. And we get to talk about this thing. And I've never had relationships. And I didn't come here for relationships. I came here to stop throwing up in my shoes and learn how to figure out this thing to live. And in turn, I've learned how to meet people and do stuff. And while that may not sound like fun to a lot of people, you're like, well, I got my own people. I don't need anybody new in it. There's an amazing amount of things that we can learn from people in our lives that come through our lives. I always laugh about it today because I'm getting older, right? And so I recognize people that come through my lives. We all have them. There's people that come in, they're great, they're fun, they're energetic, they add value to our lives. They're great people, and then they're like gone. And you're like, what happened to them? Where'd they go? And then there's people that bring negativity and all kinds of stuff, and they sit in our lives. And they just hang out there. They can move on, but we can learn from all of these people. We get to learn from each and every one of them that come through. I get to become the person I am because of those relationships. And I never knew that prior to Alcoholics Anonymous. I always just figured it was, because it was always about me, what I was going to get, where I was going to be, what I was going to do, how I was going to get it, all that stuff. And today I try to look to other people and try to help a little bit more. And, in fact, my wife tells me I probably need much more Al-Anon today. So I don't, I get some too involved in their lives too much. Alcoholics Anonymous is an amazing place. So, and the last piece that I really want to talk about here is I got sober. I found this group. I started doing service. I got it's just about at this 2-year mark where the Alcoholics Anonymous thing was going to either become permanent or I was just going to drop out of it. And I came up to this place, right? I figured the last piece that I needed was to find a woman in my life, right? Because I was new and I was doing all this stuff. And so I started talking to my sponsor more about it, and I started going out there and dating, right? And dating, one of the things my first sponsor had me do is they used to have dances in Alcoholics Anonymous. You ever try to dance when you're newly sober? It's a strange experience. I couldn't even do that, never mind go on dates and talk to people and all this stuff. And there was a woman in my life that we had become friends. We'd been doing cooperation professional community service work together. I'd seen her a lot of stuff. And my sponsor kept kicking me. He's like, why don't you go ask her out? I'm like, no, I don't know. And she's a friend. And, he said, no, go ask her out. You don't have to, marry her and have her be the love of your life. Just go out on a date, right? And, and I kept hemming and hawing. And finally, I asked her out. And when I was new, I was quiet. I couldn't talk to anybody. It was really hard for me to, if you're a new person, I talked better because I could talk about Alcoholics Anonymous, but to talk about the weather or just, that stuff it's hard to have a conversation like that. So I asked this woman out, and we went to the Puyallup Fair. And it was the most amazing experience I'd ever had up till that point in time in my life. we went to the Puyallup Fair and she just talked nonstop. There was not one awkward pause. I was fighting to get words in occasionally, right? And it was actually relieving because, when there's, you sit down and you got nothing to say and there's that awkward pause and you're trying to figure it out and you start to say stuff that you don't really mean to or want to, or, it just gets weird, right? And there was none of that. We spent that whole evening together. We had a great time. I didn't have any of those awkward pauses, and it just felt comfortable, and we later went out on a few more dates, and we were both actively involved in general service to Alcoholics Anonymous. We both had sponsors in our lives. We were both working the program. We were doing the stuff that we were supposed to do. And so we went out a few more times, and ultimately she moved in with me. We got married. We just did our 25th wedding anniversary. So boy meets girl on AA campus works, but you have to be grounded in this fellowship too. Like I said, she had a sponsor, I had a sponsor. We were talking to those people. We had our own separate home groups. We did general service, but it was never together. In fact, even today, a lot of times we won't sit at the same place when we walk into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And tonight she's sitting over there, I'm sitting here. I mean, it's same area of the room, but because I'm here for my sobriety. I'm not here for an AA date. I'm not here for that stuff. Alcoholics Anonymous is what I'm here for, is to save my life. And it has to come above, my job, my family, my relationship, everything. It's got to come first in my life. And for her, it's the same way too. It comes first before everything else. Because if it doesn't, I'll drink again. And I know for a fact that Eddie will drink again someday. I have no doubt in my mind. Been sober 31 years now. Got my sobriety date July 2nd, 1990. But I have no doubt in my mind that I won't drink again. I just think I will. Given the right set of circumstances, life gets to be life. And now you can go buy pot, in a generalized store down the street. And you can shoot up heroin on the street and not get arrested, right? I mean, come on, it's easy today. So I have no doubt that I won't use again, but my life is really, really good today. Really good, and even in the bad times when things are like, oh my God, why is this happening at this moment in time? I know everything is going to be all right, and so I don't want to drink again, but that comes from staying in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's like my first sponsor said, getting in the middle of the bed, and if I have a sponsor, I'm sponsoring guys, I'm going to meetings, I'm doing the deal, then it's easier for me to stay sober. And the last thing I want to talk about is this Zoom thing. It's gotten interesting with Zoom. I can't stay sober on Zoom. There's a lot of people that can. I was working with the people at Vancouver Intergroup or Las Vegas Intergroup down in Las Vegas, Nevada. I helped them with some stuff. We were doing a Zoom call with them and a bunch of old-time ladies down there, and they're loving it. They're like, Zoom's the best thing since everything, because they can talk to people all over the world and all the other stuff, and they think it's great. And that's great for them. I need the one-on-one communication. I need more than what happens on that screen. I need that before and after the meeting conversations. That's what my sponsor taught me. These meetings keep me sober, but what keeps me in my right mind is that meetings before and after the meeting. So get here early. Austria said, get here at 5:30 for a fellowship. It's that kind of stuff. If I just slide in for the meeting and do the hour meeting and then I slide back out and I don't talk to anybody else, that's what Zoom does for me. Some people get a lot more, out of it, but I can sit in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous today and debate whether what you're saying is true or accurate. I can argue with you in my mind about it. I can shut you off in my mind. I can be thinking about my wife and my job and every other thing going on in my life. I can sit there at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and spin. And that is not a comfortable place to be. And so Zoom, I'm not even closely, I don't even have to turn my video on, so it's an interesting place to be. So I need these meetings because even if I'm sitting in the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, once I get away from the table and I go over and talk to Dave afterwards, or Randy, or somebody else, or find the newcomer there, when I'm having that one-on-one communication, my mind is settled. I'm only thinking about that conversation. I'm not thinking about anything else. And I need that because I got a squirrel cage up here. You know, they used to talk about it at Fremont all the time, you know, and, and it just keeps going. And I thought it would slow down after I got sobriety for a while. I thought, oh, yeah, after you get 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years. Well, I got 30 and it's still going as fast as ever. And some days it's just uncomfortable. But that's where sponsoring guys, talking to them on the phone, seeing them before and after the meetings, and being a part of this thing, that's where it all comes together. So I'm so glad you guys are meeting in person. I'm so glad you're all here tonight because I couldn't do this thing by myself. I need each and every one of you here. Thank you for my sobriety.